The day my parents walked into my office, I was in the middle of the most important presentation of my career. 32 slides, 18 months of work. 4 investors sitting across the conference table, each of them representing the kind of capital that would either launch my company into its next phase or leave me starting over from scratch. My assistant had dimmed the lights. The projector was running. I had just pulled up the 3rd slide. Revenue projections, the numbers I was most proud of, when the door opened, not knocked. Opened. My mother walked in first, the way she always did, like every room she entered had been waiting for her. My father was 2 steps behind, wearing the sport coat he reserved for occasions he considered important. And behind him, my brother, his hands in his pockets, chin slightly lifted. The expression he'd worn his entire life when he thought something was already his. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I watched my assistant's face go pale at the door, and I held up one finger, nodded at them, and turned back to my investors. "I apologize," I said. "Give me 60 seconds. I walked to the door, I pulled it shut behind me, and I stood in the hallway with the 3 people I had spent the last 4 years learning how to live without. "You need to leave," I said. My mother tilted her head like I'd said something slightly ridiculous. "We drove 2 hours, Mia. I'm in the middle of a presentation. This won't take long." My father gestured vaguely at the door. "We just want to talk about the opportunity." My brother said nothing. He was looking past me at the glass wall of the conference room, at the investors still sitting at the table, at the slides still glowing on the screen behind them. "I'll call you tonight," I said. "You won't," my mother said. "You never do." She wasn't wrong, and she knew exactly why. But this was not the moment, and she had chosen this moment deliberately, and we both knew that too. "Tonight," I said again. "Or not at all." I went back into the conference room, closed the door, apologized again, and finished the presentation. My voice was steady. My hands did not shake. When the last slide faded, and the lights came back up, and the lead investor leaned forward and said he was ready to talk terms, I smiled like nothing had happened. They were gone by the time I walked back out, but they left a folder on the reception desk with my name written on the front in my father's handwriting. I should explain what I mean when I say I spent 4 years learning to live without them, because that phrase sounds more dramatic than it felt at the time. It felt ordinary, quiet. Like slowly realizing that a sound you'd stopped hearing a long time ago had been hurting you the whole time. I built my company, Solaris Creative, out of a spare bedroom in a rented apartment. I was 26. I had a graphic design degree, $8,000 in savings, and a client list that fit on a single sheet of paper. My aunt, my mother's older sister, the one my mother had always considered the failure of the family because she'd chosen teaching over marriage. She was the one who sat at my kitchen table with me in those first months. She proofread my contracts. She lent me $4,000 when a client payment fell through in November and my rent was due. She drove 40 minutes to help me deliver printed materials for an event when my car broke down on the highway. My parents, during that same period, were managing my brother's 3rd attempt to pass the CPA exam. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I've had enough time to set it down, but the math of it stays with me. The way a family's resources follow its priorities, and the way those priorities tell you, without anyone having to say it, exactly where you stand. My brother had been positioned as the financial mind of the family since he was 16. My father's version of the future always had him at the center of it. When I chose design over accounting, my mother said, very gently, that she hoped I understood what I was giving up. When I started my own business, my father said, also gently, that it was a very competitive field. When I got my first major client, a regional hotel chain, a contract worth more than my father made in a year, nobody called. I called them. I told my mother. She said, "That's wonderful, honey. Your brother just scheduled his retake for March." I stopped calling after that, not dramatically, not with a speech or a letter or a list of grievances. I just stopped, and they let me, which told me everything I needed to know about how much space I occupied in the version of the future they were building. 4 years passed, Solaris grew. I hired 7 people. We moved from the spare bedroom to a real office in the arts district, the kind with exposed brick and big windows, and a small kitchen where my team kept an unreasonable amount of flavored sparkling water. I had 2 long-term clients and a pipeline of smaller ones and a reputation in the city for doing exactly what I said I would do, on time, every time. My brother had failed the CPA exam twice more. That's when my parents showed up. I opened the folder that night. Inside was a 2-page document my father had clearly written himself, formatted in a way that suggested he'd watched a lot of business proposal videos online but hadn't quite absorbed them. The language was formal in the wrong places and casual in others. It referred to my company as the enterprise in some paragraphs and me as business in others. The proposal was simple. My brother would join Solaris Creative as Chief Financial Officer. He would receive a salary commensurate with his qualifications and the scope of the role. He would be granted an ownership stake. The document said to be discussed. But then, in a handwritten note in the margin, my father had written 35%. In exchange, my parents would offer what the document called family support and advisory guidance going forward. I read it twice. Then I set it on my kitchen counter and made myself a cup of tea and stood at the window looking out at the parking lot below and tried to figure out what I was feeling. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something more like recognition, like watching a magic trick you'd already seen and understanding which hand the coin was in. I called my aunt. They came to my office, I said. A pause. Oh, Mia, they want to give him CFO, 35%. Another pause, longer this time. Then, what does he know about financial management? He's failed the CPA exam 4 times. Okay, she said. Okay, what are you going to do? I looked at the folder on the counter, the neat handwriting on the front, the 2 hours they'd driven, the timing of it, the open door, the investors still in the room, the deliberateness of all of it. I'm going to handle it, I said. I want to be honest about the next few weeks because I think the honest version is more useful than the version where I say I was perfectly calm and strategic the whole time. I wasn't. There were nights when I sat with my phone in my hand and almost called my mother back. Not to agree to anything, just to hear her say something that wasn't calculated. To have one conversation that wasn't about what I had and what they wanted from it. That's the part of this that people don't talk about enough. The grief of it, not the betrayal, which is real but navigable, but the specific grief of watching your family and understanding, finally and completely, that the version of them you needed when you were young does not exist and never did. I let myself feel that for about 10 days. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Cecily. She'd done my business incorporation and a contract dispute 2 years prior, and she has the kind of directness I find deeply reassuring in legal matters. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Okay, 3 things. First, obviously, don't sign anything. Second, we need to talk about your current ownership structure and any vulnerabilities. Third, do you have documentation of your startup capital?" I did. My aunt's loan was in writing, she'd insisted, because she's the kind of person who understands that love and paperwork are not mutually exclusive. My initial investment, my client records, my incorporation's documents, all clean, all in order. Good, Cecily said. Now, has anyone made any public claims about the business? At that point, no. But that changed. My brother called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I answered because I'd been expecting it, and because I'd learned that the conversations you avoid have a way of finding you anyway, usually at a worse time. "I just want to understand where you're coming from," he said. He had that voice on, the reasonable one, the one he used when he wanted something but was trying to seem like he didn't. "Which part are you unclear on?" I said. "Dad put a lot of work into that proposal. He proposed giving you 35% of a company you have no professional qualifications to hold equity in." A pause. "You don't have to be mean about it. I'm being accurate about it. I'm family," he said. "That should count for something." And there it was. The thing that was supposed to stop me. The word that was supposed to make the math stop mattering. Family counted when I was building this, I said. Where were you then? He didn't answer that. If you want to work at Solaris, I said, I'll treat you the same way I treat anyone who applies. You submit a resume, you interview. If you're qualified for a role we have open, we discuss compensation. That's it. So you're saying no. I'm saying apply like everyone else. He hung up. 20 minutes later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 4 minutes long and covered, in no particular order, how much they had sacrificed, how ungrateful I had always been, how my father's health had been suffering, and how my aunt had always poisoned me against the family. The last part she said twice. I saved the voicemail. Cecily had told me to save everything. What happened next is the part of this story I still find hard to describe without sounding like I'm exaggerating. So I'll just tell you the facts in the order they happened. 3 weeks after the meeting in my office, a review appeared on a business ratings platform. It said Solaris Creative had failed to deliver on a contracted project, that I had pocketed the deposit and stopped responding to the client. It named a client, a real client, one I had worked with 2 years prior, and said they had never received the final deliverables. The client hadn't written it. I knew this because I called her directly the morning I saw it, and she was mortified, and she told me she'd never said any such thing and that the project had been completed to her full satisfaction. She offered to write a counterstatement immediately. I thanked her and said I'd be in touch. Then a second review appeared on a different platform. Then someone emailed 2 of my current clients. I don't know how they got the contact information, with a message suggesting that I was under investigation for financial misconduct. No detail, no documentation, just the suggestion, which is often enough. I got the call from the first of those clients on a Thursday morning. She was apologetic, but worried. I just want to know if there's anything going on, she said. I don't want any surprises. I told her there was nothing going on. I told her I would send her full documentation of our project status and financials by end of day. I told her I was aware of where the emails were coming from and that it was a personal matter being handled legally. She stayed. The second client, after a phone call and the same documentation package, also stayed. But I want you to understand what those 2 weeks felt like. Watching something you built with your own hands, your name, your reputation, the thing that required years of 6-day weeks and late invoices and the kind of anxiety that lives behind your sternum. Watching someone pick it up and try to break it. Not for any reason except that you said no. I called Cecily. She was already 2 steps ahead of me. Here is what we had. The IP address behind the fraudulent reviews was traceable, not to my parents directly, but to a device registered at my brother's address. Cecily had a friend in digital forensics who was not cheap, but was very, very good. The email sent to my clients had been routed through a free service that doesn't store logs, but the language in it, a specific phrase about fiduciary accountability, appeared word for word in my father's proposal document. The one he'd written and left in the folder on my reception desk. The one I had kept. My aunt, it turned out, had also received a call. Someone had called her school. She teaches 8th grade. And spoken to the front office, claiming to be from a financial oversight board and asking questions about her involvement in a business dispute. The school had logged the call. My aunt had reported it to her principal. Cecily filed the defamation claim on a Friday. The cease and desist went out the same day. I did not call my parents to warn them. I want to be honest about that. I thought about it. I sat with the impulse for longer than I expected. Not because I owed them the warning, but because there is something in me, something I think will always be in me, that kept hoping, in the most irrational possible way, that I was wrong about who they were. I wasn't. My mother called me the Monday after the paperwork was served. She was crying. Not the kind of crying that means someone is sorry. The kind that means someone is frightened and is hoping the crying will work the way it used to. We didn't think you'd actually go that far, she said. I built that company, I said. Someone was trying to destroy it. It was just a few reviews, Mia. We were just trying to… What? I said. What were you trying to do? She didn't finish the sentence. She went back to crying instead. Somewhere in the background, I could hear my father's voice, low, saying something I couldn't make out. "You need to speak to my attorney," I said. "I'm not able to directly about this anymore." "So that's it? You're choosing a lawyer over your family?" I had been thinking about this question for a long time. Maybe my whole life, in different forms. "You chose," I said. A long time before I did. I hung up. I sat in my office for a few minutes with the door closed. Then I went back to work. The legal process took 5 months, which feels both very long and somehow exactly right. Long enough for me to understand that it was real. Right enough for me to finish it. My brother did not have a lawyer. He eventually retained one, 2 months in, but by then the documentation was fahafif, and the case was clear. The defamation's claim settled. The terms are confidential, but I'll tell you what they are not. They are not nothing. My parents did not apologize. I want to be clear about that, because I think people expect a moment of reckoning in these stories. A scene where the difficult people finally see themselves clearly and say the thing they should have said years ago. That didn't happen. My mother sent me a text message in the 4th month that said she hoped I was doing well and that she thought about me. I read it twice. I didn't respond. My father hasn't contacted me at all. My brother, 6 months after the settlement, sent me a LinkedIn connection request. I declined it. Solaris Creative is doing well. We won a contract this year with a regional university system. A rebrand, their first in 11 years. And the scope of it is the largest thing I've ever put my name on. My team has grown to 12 people. We moved into a bigger office last spring, still in the arts district, still with the big windows. We have a coffee machine now instead of the sparkling water, though the sparkling water is still there. My aunt came to our office opening party. She stood in the kitchen, eating cheese cubes and looking at the framed project samples on the wall. And at some point she found me and put her hand on my arm and said, "I knew you'd do it," I said. "You were the only one who did." She shook her head. "You knew too," she said. "You just needed someone to agree with you." I've thought about that a lot since then. The way having one person in your corner, not 1,000, not a crowd, just one, can be the thing that makes the difference between believing in yourself and giving up. My aunt gave me that. Not just the money, not just the help. She gave me the experience of being believed in, which turns out to be the thing I had needed all along and hadn't known to name. I don't spend much time thinking about what my parents are doing. Occasionally, someone who knows both of us will mention something in passing. My brother is working in accounting at a mid-sized firm, I heard, entry level. My mother is fine. My father is fine. They are living their lives, which is what I want for them genuinely, because wanting something bad for them would mean still being attached to them, and I am not. What I am is free. That's the thing nobody tells you about cutting the cord. Not the grief version, not the empowerment poster version, but the real version. It doesn't feel like winning. It doesn't feel like losing. It feels like quiet. Like walking into your own office on a Tuesday morning and knowing that every single thing in that room exists because of what you did, and knowing that it's safe, and knowing that it belongs to you. I put my key in the lock, I turn on the lights, I make the coffee. Every single morning, I choose this life, and every single morning, it's still mine.